Hello there. My name is Bob, and this is 6 positive ecological things that may come out of this terrible time of coronavirus. And these are long-term good ecological things. Short-term, we know we've seen, as hard as this time has been, and it's been dreadful in any number of ways, in terms of our physical health, mental health, so many things. It's been an awful time. But we know that ecologically we've lowered our carbon footprint a little bit. We've been hearing birds in the morning. At least I've heard more birds, and I've heard from many others that as we're driving less, emissions are less, the air is cleaner. There are all these short-term benefits, but we know this is a temporary time. How temporary, we don't know. But this is an unusual time. And so I wanted to think long-term for this Earth Day talk and think about, is there anything long-term we can glean from this? And I've identified 6 things that might be, might is the operative word here, might be positive developments in our relationship with the Earth and our ecological understanding. So I'll say those. First, I'll just introduce myself so you know where I'm coming from. I am a Unitarian minister, and I know that there are quite a few religious people who are climate change deniers. And though they are my sisters and brothers in faith, I very much disagree with climate change denialism. I think it's very clear from just looking at the Earth what our relationship with it has, since the Industrial Revolution, and especially in the last couple of generations, has created a crisis. And I do think in the next probably 500 years, it's going to be a time of great upheaval. So much upheaval that this time, which seems so much upheaval, is actually pales in comparison. That the next 500 years are going to face enormous challenges. And now we have a little bit of knowledge about how that feels like, because I think it's going to be an order of magnitude greater than what we're facing now. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that. So we're facing a kind of a reckoning since our Industrial Revolution, since all of this, since we've been able to change our relationship with the Earth in such a radical way. And the next generations are going to face some really, really challenging times. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that I'm an eco-saint. I'm certainly not. You can see I'm on a phone at the moment, talking to you on a phone. I have a car. I love computers. I do go on holidays. So if you want to call me a hypocrite, that's fine. I'd like to look at it that I'm trying to do my best, and we all are. And this isn't about individual shaming. This is about what can we do collectively. And I think we can live collectively better as a species. And I do think we have a chance to craft a better future for ourselves as humanity and for the planet with all this, we're so much species extinction going on at the moment and polluting our oceans and so many terrible things. And we can turn a corner. We're just starting to figure this out. There is hope, quite a lot of hope. So that's what I want to talk about today. So 6 positive things. Now, I'm trying not to look at it with rose-tinted spectacles. As I said, I think this time of reduced carbon emissions and birdsong in the morning and all these positive developments, we're going to feel this urge to kind of go back to the way we've been living. And that is natural. I can't wait to go. I'd love to go on another holiday, I have to be honest. I do like to shop occasionally, and all of this stuff is going to have a detriment on the environment. So I'm not saying everything's going to be wonderful. It is going to be a challenging time, and it's going to see what this change is going to be. But there are 6. The first development, I think, is that what we think of as normal is not inevitable. There was this argument against kind of having a better relationship with the Earth and improving our climate footprint with this. Well, it's just the status quo. The argument from inertia, I call it. The argument from inertia says, well, it's just the way it is. It's just that's the way capitalism's got to be. That's the way we are as a global society. It's all very well talking about all this kind of, green stuff, but, we're never going to change. Well, that's been blown out of the water because clearly society can change. And society faced a crisis. If we hadn't done anything, millions of people, I don't think that's an exaggeration, millions of people would have died from this coronavirus. And as it is, hundreds of thousands of people have died. But our leaders, and we said that's an unacceptable cost, and we changed things in a radical way. And I think for the better, we were able to save a number of lives that are going to, some maybe, quite elderly, but quite a few are going to live quite a lot longer because we did the right thing. And it was hard to do the right thing, but we did it. So how much more so for the environment, which, as I say, is an order of magnitude bigger in the long run, probably a couple of orders of magnitude, we can do the right thing. We know we can. So that argument from inertia that we just can't do it, that's off the table now, which is a very, very good development. So that's one. So that's more of a theoretical. I wanted to get number two is a practical one. And so the number two thing I'd like to say is less commuting to work. Now we've already seen that people are commuting from via Zoom and via the internet and what have you. And I know that's not carbon neutral, but it's a heck of a lot better. And not only that, I know people miss going into work. Maybe not everybody does, but I know people do. I do. But also, we've seen that it's kind of nice to be home at the same time, right? It's nice to be, I know we're all, those of us with children are there with our children, and it can be a crowded house, but it's a lovely crowded house. And it's lovely to not a lot of us don't miss, those of us who are in cars for an hour to work, or in crowded trains, crowded public transport, buses. We don't miss doing that every day. So as we go back to work, we have an opportunity here because we've shown that we can do it. And I think even though there's more telecommuting happening, I think there's not enough for the work that we do. I think a lot of employers, frankly, it's kind of laziness. It's easy enough to say that our employees should be here, because then if I want to talk to somebody, I know where they are and I can go down the hall and tap them on the shoulder. And that's all very well. But it's not an excuse to have somebody come in 5 days a week when they don't need to, when they can do it from home. And I know we may want to come in, for meetings, because we do like meetings in person, and maybe we do it 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And I know this varies on the industry. But I think we have an opportunity as we come back to really put pressure on, and this is a good point, to put pressure on employees to work collectively to say, look, there's no need in my line of work, whatever it is you're doing, if there isn't a need for you to be there 5 days a week, we need to speak up collectively and speak up for you and say, look, it's a lot healthier for families. It's a lot healthier in the environment. It's better mental health. We live happier lives if we come in 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and then the rest of the time we do it from home, and we show them we can do that. And there's no reason we can't keep doing that. So I think we need to keep shifting the working week. And if we do that, the carbon footprint goes down dramatically if enough people do it. We've seen that already. And I don't know if we can get the results we're getting at the moment, but we can do really, really well. So this is a real opportunity. So that's number two, less commuting to work, which will make us all happier as well as healthier. The third one is kind of on the same idea, but a little more general, which is moving from a stuff-based economy to a happiness-based economy. Now, I recommend to you the short video, The Story of Stuff, which talks about how we have this economy based on generating stuff and using stuff and then throwing stuff out. We've got all this plastic that isn't going anywhere, because we just keep marketing and buying and selling all this stuff. Now, not all of us are in manufacturing, but we all participate in this story of stuff. And I think it's really interesting that, productivity is such a word for us, that whether we're in the service sector or the manufacturing sector or whatever, there is this thought about being productive, which is from product, of course. So it's this whole more mindset. And I hope that this has shown us that we really don't want to live in that kind of more. It's not a happy place to be. It's certainly not ecologically responsible, and we can't keep it up. The population gets more and more, and we use more and more stuff. We eat more and more foods like beef and meats that use more and more of a carbon footprint, and this more and more is just going to lead us into a dead end. So it's a shift in perspective from that idea of stuff-based to happiness-based. Like, what really makes us as happy as an economy, and how can we be? And when I talk about happiness, I'm not just talking about materialism, and we can argue theoretically about, does the material world make us happy? I'd say there's an argument to be made for that. I love my cup of coffee in the morning, and that's material, right? But I think we know that more material doesn't equal more happiness. So we need a different approach to the material world, a different approach to productivity. And instead of having a stuff-based economy, which is based on more and more and everybody doing something, slowing down and having a happiness-based economy. And at the moment, we have millions of people out of work, newly out of work. We did before, but many more millions who are newly out of work. And I know the impetus is going to be, let's get everybody doing something. Let's get productive again. And I think that's the wrong impetus. And I know we're already shifting as societies, global society and national societies. And I think we need to keep thinking, what are we doing here? Is really the object to get everybody productive? And if so, why? And what's the point of that? And where's that going to head? Because I think what is the ramifications for that? 50 years, 500 years, 5,000 years? And if you can show me a plan that says, oh, that's going to be fine, that's something. But if you just say, well, we just need to do it because that's how economies work, sorry, that's not going to cut it. And it's not. It's also false. Looking at it historically, so we need to move from this kind of stuff-based, productivity-based economy to really looking at overall fulfillment and well-being, and what does it mean to really be successful as a species? What does it mean to live on this earth well? So just looking at that kind of way of looking at things. And so the fourth one, I really didn't want to make this a religious talk, and I know I'm a religious person, but I did want to talk about our values and spirituality. And the fourth one, I think, and this is a hard one, is that this crisis is kind of making us come to terms with our own fear of death. And I think a lot of our ecological irresponsibility can be traced back to kind of us as a species being clever enough to be conscious that we're mortal, but not being wise enough or clever enough to really deal with it. We're running away from our own fear of death with shopping, with driving, with all this kind of stuff, this behavior towards the environment that's just consume, to not have to think about the fact that we're here 1 minute and then at any minute, death can arrive. Now, I know religiously there are many, and philosophically, many different approaches to death, from heaven to reincarnation. And I don't want to get too much into those. From a Christian perspective, I'll say, I'm very interested in that Jesus in a lot of the Gospels, just say this briefly and then I'll move on from religion. He's not talking about angels and harps. When he talks about the kingdom of heaven, he's talking about something that's close enough for us to touch. And he actually, when the Sadducees ask him about what happens, which one do I marry when I'm in heaven, he kind of brushes the question aside. He says that's not important, which is interestingly the same approach that Buddha takes when asked about God. And Jesus talks about living in the now and living in the kind of eternity in the now and being in that kingdom of heaven, feeling that sense of the eternal in the now. But a lot of what both the Christian and the Buddhist message, just to name two, and the existentialist message, I'll name three, is talking about being aware of that death is a reality for our lives, that we're not here, at least not in this form, forever, but also letting go of our grasping nature, being so attached to life, because we're not going to be here forever anyway. It's not going to help how tightly we grasp it. So from the Buddhist perspective, it's not attachment. From the Christian perspective, it's pisteo, which means believe, but even more than that means be persuaded to a new way of life, metanoia, to a change of mind, a change of perspective. And that change of perspective is living in a more generous way. So coming to terms with our fear of death, which is really hard to do because we don't like to think about it. But if we're going to be mature human beings, right, we're going to have to, right? That's kind of what this whole midlife thing is about, at least. And some of us do it earlier, some of us do it later, but thinking about that kind of way of being. And instead of just saying we must prevent death at all costs, and here I think the physician Atul Gawande, I recommend his work highly. We have a fear-based healthcare system, at least in the US, and to some extent, I think, in other places as well. And I'm speaking from the UK, but I know in the US as well. But being aware, we want to reduce death. Of course, we want to stay safe, and that's really important. But life is ultimately this kind of adventure where we're not going to stay safe all the time. And that's not to say we should be infecting each other with the coronavirus and completely not having any precautions. That I think is ridiculous, because we can do a lot in the next year to prevent hundreds of thousands of deaths, so why not? But if it makes us think about death, I think, it can get morbid now. If you want to distract yourself from it, that's great. But in the long term, I think it's good that all of us kind of reflect on it. And whatever our beliefs about the afterlife, try and come to terms with death enough to live generously, because we're not here forever. So not to try and react to death with just accumulating more stuff and, just avoiding it and going on 1,000 holidays that don't mean anything, but really trying to slow down, think about what life's all about, and just kind of make the most of this life and really live. I think when we're aware of death and we've spent some time with it, at first it's a panic, but then we learn to live a little more generously, and we're able to live generously and live abundantly and live courageously and really be more giving. And I think people who have really faced death, whether it be through circumstances or through meditation, do live slightly more, I'm generalizing here, but I do think often people who meditate and reflect on this do live a little more generously and a little more outward focused than those of us who maybe avoid thinking about it. The fifth one, that was a really downer, so here's a really simple, practical one. More walks. Here in the UK, where we said we can have one walk for exercise a day, which is interesting because we're following that. My children have already said we do more walks than we used to. Because when they say only one a day, then you really take your walk, right? And sometimes when we're so busy, the most we walk is to and from school. So we've taken some walks out in nature, and it's lovely. And so walking, and one of the things I love about British culture, I will say, because it's throughout Great Britain, is this emphasis on walking as something to do, not to see a sight, though there are sightseeing, not to get exercise, so that's wonderful, but just walking, just to be out there. And I think walking is something that we can do that's a very, very low carbon footprint, and it's really what life's about. You can't. It's not achieving something. You don't need to capture it on your phone. It's just, you can, fine, that's fine. But it's really just about just being out there and walking. And there's something really wonderful about that. I think the more we do it, the better we'll be in terms of happiness, in terms of enlightenment. So there's a really simple one, more walks. Let's keep up with the walking. Keep walking everywhere, making land public, making it so people can walk places. I'm a fan of being on the other side of the no trespassing sign, as Woody Guthrie says, and walking, asserting our right to walk, because this is our land. So more walks is a really good thing. And so the sixth one, go back to the theoretical, but this is a happier one, I think, is living with great care. And I think we talk about this, caring for one another. It's become really poignant at the moment when we imagine it's a horrible thing. So I said this was going to be light, but it is a horrible thing to think about. We could visit someone who's in a nursing home that we love, and just visiting them could pass on the coronavirus, and that's terrible. I can't explain why it is. It just seems awful. But it reminds us of how much we need to care for one another. And this has been a time of incredible caring. Whatever else it has been, this last month has been a time of incredible caring in the world. There have been so many individual acts of caring, so much collective caring. And so this is shown, and when we say care for the earth, that's what we mean is really loving the earth. I've never been great at loving the earth, but yesterday I spent a day in a struggle of collective liberation with a bee. And the bee was stuck on a pane on the window, and I was trying to get it to the other window so I could open the door and let the bee out. And we were working on it together, and the bee wasn't sure whether she trusted me, which is fair enough. And I wasn't sure if I was up to the task. I was trying to figure out how to do it. And together we were trying to figure out how to get the bee from this point to that point and out into the world. And we did it, and it was such a great feeling. But I could feel that caring for each other. And I don't want to paint me as a great liberator, because the bee went out and pollinated the world, and without bees we wouldn't survive. So really, the bees did their part too. So I just living with great care that we come out of this. I would love for us to come out of this so grateful every time our feet touch the earth, that we're so grateful to be alive. And every time we look at nature, whatever nature means, every time we look at something nature, because nature's all around us, that we're so grateful for it, and that we're so dedicated to care of it. And I know we'll forget, because that's part of human nature. But I think there'll be a seed planted in us, in our nature, that helps us to remember. And so I think we need that seed. And if we are really dedicating to living with great care for one another and for the planet, it's going to feel so good. It is going to be challenging. But it's gonna be such a better way to live. So there you have it. There are six good things ecologically that can come out of this terrible time. And of course, all of those who are suffering and those who are grieving are in my heart. It is a terrible time, but it's also a time of opportunity for us. You may disagree. You may have many things to add. Feel free to comment in the comment section. These are just my thoughts, and most of them are not original, and other people are thinking them too. But happy Earth Day, everyone. It's a wonderful blessing to be here on this planet, and it's a wonderful blessing to be here with you. So be well. God bless. Peace be with you, and happy Earth Day.